And next we have the Congress. What has Congress done? Nothing. Nothing. So they're just an agency under the federal government. So now let me go to my last slide, and it's fortunate for me because we have a question that we pose to candidates in Alabama very, very frequently. We never, ever have gotten any candidate in the past 7, 8 years that I know of, maybe longer than that, that has correctly answered the question. Now the question is, what is the purpose of government? Now remember that our elected officials lay their hand on the Bible and they swear to uphold the Constitution of both the federal government and the state of Alabama. Well, we have 36 rights in the Alabama Constitution. And it's an indictment on the school system in Alabama that I didn't know that when I graduated from high school. This should be information that every high school graduate knows. But it says in Article 1, Section 35 of the Alabama Constitution that the sole object and only legitimate end of government is to protect the citizen, the individual, in the enjoyment of life, liberty, and property. And when government assumes other function, it is usurpation and oppression. Now, hold up. Let me explain one thing about this. Everybody in the 1700s would have recognized that John Locke coined that phrase. John Locke, I think, is the third most quoted individual of the founding era. And he coined the phrase life, liberty, and property. Jefferson came along and said it is redundant to say life and property because without life, obviously, you can have no property. Now, I'm going to leave you with a thought that if government will not protect the first aspect of property among the most innocent among us, don't expect them to respect your private property as an adult. So, Jack.
Thank you, Don. That was amazing. We're going to do a real quick Q&A here. One of the books that Don talked about by Frederic Bastiat is available at the Georgia Tea Party back there. They have this book. It's The Law. So there's plenty of copies back there if you all want to pick one up. So we got time for a couple of questions. We got to move it along here, so we got several more things to cover. So if you all want to come up, same thing we did before, please. Quickly. I know.
I just wanted to know if the Supreme Court case that's going forward right now about the people that own property, I think out in California, is going to have any effect on any of this.
Likely it won't, because it is a Supreme Court ruling on an administrative ruling of an agency of the federal government, because so now they haven't gotten down to the root cause of what's going on. It's just, they're just commenting on the fact that they have the right to take it to court, because the agency was denying them the right to go to court. So they have years before they ever get this thing resolved.
If you have a question, I'll come get you. I'll come get you. Yeah.
My wife has a question regarding what can be done in the local school systems. All school systems, including the liberal colleges.
Well, let me say that I have a handout that is what the individual can do. The very first thing that you can do as an individual is to use the Hegelian dialectic. Now, that sounds very highfalutin. Friedrich Hegel was a psychologist in, I think, the 1800s, and he said that all we have to do is to use language to move you from your secure, principled position to that of a new one. And now, let me give you some examples. You have constitutional rights. Most everybody would agree with that. In fact, you do not. You have unalienable rights affirmed in the Constitution. The Constitution is a piece of paper penned by the hand of man. Now, let me go on and say that if you are in a conversation with your children, this is one of the most important things that you can bring out to him, is so that he understands that those rights are not inalienable. They are granted from your Creator to him, and that in order to secure those rights, you don't go to a law book somewhere and look and see that there's private property rights expressed. Your private property rights are only protected because you are willing to stand up for your neighbor and protect his rights. Because if his rights go, your rights go. So now, what can you do? turn the tide and begin to use language that goes back to where it should be. For instance, we have allowed the pro-life and pro-choice people to frame the discussion. They want to be known as pro-choice, but we should acknowledge they're pro-murder. And if we can begin to do that, we'll begin to reverse this. So another one is a moment of silence. You don't have a moment of silence as a Christian. You come to on your knees before the Creator, thanking Him for what He has done for you, not a moment of silence. Why in the world would you want to do that? And I've actually heard preachers that stand in the pulpit and do that. What can we do to the school systems? We can stand up and film what goes on in these school systems and begin to put it on the internet. There's lots of things that we can do.